This video is not for whales and dolphins. It's for you, because you are just like me. Average Gamer here, and I've had a chance to test out Burnice, and I want to talk about her team options, because I feel like that's the most interesting part of running any character is who do you run them with. And I think we can be real and admit that as cool as Burnice is, she feels like probably the least essential character so far, because a lot of the teams that we will put her in are going to look better with Burnice for the most part, but they probably would have still functioned pretty well without her. Nonetheless, she is super fun, and let's talk about her teams. Now, I'm going to focus and spend some time on her teams that are lower investment in terms of polychrome, so you don't have to sit here while I bang on about how good she is with Jane, because she's obviously good with Jane, and those two together, yes, very good. So let's skim over the Jane stuff quickly. Yes, there's 2 limited S ranks here, so we'll get on to more relatable teams in just a sec, but let's mainly focus on that 3rd slot in the team, as that's where the big question mark is. Now, I prefer Lucy in the support in the 3rd slot because she buffs both of them, as opposed to Seth, who can only buff whoever he puts the shield on. I do think that Seth might be a little comfier in terms of survivability if you find you're getting hit really hard, but I'd say Lucy is comfier from a gameplay perspective. She comes on, holds the X special, and yep, see you in 15 seconds. I've tried out both, and I find I clear faster with Lucy, but that might just be because she's a lot easier to play, and I feel that Seth's animations take a while, and you lose less time with Lucy. And this is especially true at M2 and above, as she can re-up her buff from the chain attack. So as I mentioned, I prefer Lucy here, but I still think Seth is a fine choice. Naturally, you can also consider Caesar here too, but much like with Jane, I'm not going to spend too long talking about her. Yes, of course she works well. And on that note, I'm going to talk quite a bit in this video about Lucy or Seth for Burnice's teams, but if you have Caesar, you could just put Caesar in that slot, unless she's already taken up by your other team, and then the Lucy or Seth stuff is probably still useful for you to know. So let's make this more interesting and talk about some more free-to-play friendly options, starting with Piper. So Piper is incredible with Burnice. They function very similarly as Jane and Burnice. Burnice burns and applies the Scorched Thang, and then Piper hits her assaults. It's great, but obviously less comfortable than Jane due to Piper wanting to stick her spins, and then she ends up taking damage unless you're really smart with your positioning, which I am not. Now that 3rd slot though is definitely contentious, so Lucy is good here for all the same reasons that she's good with Jane, and I found that I was able to clear faster with Lucy than with Seth in the 3rd slot. However, even though Seth would be a downgrade in terms of power, I think he's kind of important for Piper when she wants to stick those spins. Not just because of his buff, although that is useful, but because of his shield, as that enables Piper to tank a bit more than she would have been able to otherwise, meaning that she can stick those spins without fear of like dying. Now, to be honest, I found that on my fastest clears, I cleared with Lucy in about 20 to 25 seconds faster, but that could be because of her buffing both characters again, or because I just feel more comfortable with her. But on one clear with Lucy, Piper just tanked 1 too many hits and died. Yes, I know I suck, but it just made me feel that as much as this team might be better in terms of clear times, I didn't have any need to reset with Seth, so I would say it's more consistent with Seth, and it wasn't like I couldn't S-rank with Seth. I still had plenty of time. It was just under 2-minute clear for Seth for the second side of Shiyu 7 with my probably averagely built characters for someone who's been playing since the start. Ultimately though, I think this one depends on your skill. For a smoother ride, I'd pick Seth, but if I was going for a faster clear, I'd stick with Lucy. Something to also add about Seth here is that he loses his core additional abilities to drop the enemy's build-up resistance by 20%, and as much as this is useful, I don't think it's a deal breaker in terms of keeping Seth in the team if you prefer that. We'll move on to talking about Grace in just a moment, but just before then, this is your reminder that you probably aren't subscribed. Liking and subscribing is the best way to show small creators like me support. Thank you so much for all the support so far. I love making videos, and it feels surreal that you've even watched this far, so thank you. Also, if you want to hang out with some other chill peeps, you can join my Discord. Link is in the description. Okay, moving on. So some players may have lost a 50-50 by now, but probably not 3. Thanks for that, Hoyoverse. But you may have chanced across a Grace if you've been a little unlucky. And I think she was one of the most sought after characters in terms of standard S ranks when the game came out. And players might also be considering who to use their 300 pull S rank freebie on. And maybe if you got Burnice, you might be thinking about pairing her up with Grace. And you can, but the TLDR here is it's not as good as Piper. Now, you can make use of both Lucy and Seth in the support slot, and Seth here will be able to activate his core additional ability as he shares the electric attribute with Grace. And this means that she also enables hers too, which is pretty good. If you weren't aware, it increases the shock damage by a not an insignificant amount, so running them both together does make sense, but kind of in contrast to Piper, Grace doesn't have to stick spins like Piper does, and as much as she wants the field time, she doesn't need the shield because she's so mobile. She doesn't need to get up in enemies' faces, she can stay at a safer distance back. So this does also mean that the shield doesn't get eaten up by hits. So considering the team building aspect of it, Seth certainly seems like the pick here over Lucy. Lucy does still work well here though, even though Grace won't be activating her passive if you did run her, but I found that my clears were very similar in terms of time. I think that there would be a higher ceiling though for the Seth team if you got really solid at playing it than the Lucy team, as you're activating all their core passives. I'll also mention that Grace can hit a bunch of enemies at once, so if you position things correctly and you have the Scorch effect on them from Burnice, Grace can absolutely shred through the mobs, which does feel pretty awesome. So next up, does a mono fire team work? Kind of. It's good enough. It works well enough to clear, but I don't think this is it for Soldier 11. Now, I did move some discs around to give Burnice energy regen instead of Anomaly Mastery here when I was testing it, because there's going to be enough burn with Lucy and Soldier 11, and potentially I thought I could make more use of Burnice's energy to get more EX specials off. I did not, however, try crit Burnice here, so building Burnice for crit, because my drive disc luck has been abysmal, but apparently she is slightly better. Ultimately though, I hope that this would make my Soldier 11 feel better, because she'll benefit from constantly burning enemies with her Inferno Metal buff, and as much as that did work, it still wasn't great, and it didn't really feel like it was any better than any of the other teams I tested. Now, if you've massively invested into Soldier 11, it could feel a lot better, but I'd honestly just much rather run her with Piper. Burnice this is. I'd much rather run Burnice with Piper, who feels great even at lower investment levels. Now, if you did also happen to have Khalida as well to stun the enemy for Soldier 11 and keep the buff up, that might be better. However, that would mean Burnice would lose her additional ability, as she wouldn't be being run with the Sons of Kaladin or Anomaly Agent teammate. I don't think this necessarily would matter too much though, due to the amount of fire that would be being built. So essentially, you'd just be running Burnice here for the additional damage in that slot, and I don't know how much value that would provide over someone like Ben, who would be more synergistic with Khalida, for example. So I don't have Khalida to test it, but if anyone is running a team like this, then do let me know down in the comments below how it works for you. But again, I don't think it'll be that much of an improvement. Good, sure, but sorry Soldier 11 fans, I think we'll need to wait to see a bit more of Obol Squad to make the most out of her at this point. Lastly then, in terms of teams, what about running Burnice as a DPS herself? Well, again, I did manage to clear. I used both Lucy and Seth with her to kind of double buff her, and she definitely did damage both from her flamethrowers and through her damage over time Scorch effect. I found that I also did hit a couple of solid disorders due to Seth's presence, but it certainly wasn't as big as when running her with dedicated Anomaly agents. Now, here's a caveat worth mentioning though. In terms of my Lucy and Seth builds, both have the right main stats across their drive discs and are level 60, which is, I would say, above the minimum for supports because you can get away with less investment, but that is kind of where you should be aiming to get to if you aren't there yet. So what I want to move on to say is that if you invested into building up Lucy and Seth more, then they could potentially be way better. You could run them as though they were like dual buffing DPSs, with both of them causing pretty respectable damage and then Burnice hopping in to set it on fire as required. So as much as that didn't work too well right now, I do think it has potential if you invested more into your supports. I know I didn't test her with everyone, but she really is a great Anomaly agent, and she benefits from additional Anomaly agents. So of course she works really well with Piper and Grace, and I wonder if there's any other agents that are coming up that might be really good with her. I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that one. In terms of what I found interesting though, from trying out a bunch of different teams, was how I preferred Seth in certain situations. Even though Lucy is better and can clear faster, I think the additional safety provided by Seth just made him easier to play in certain situations, particularly with Piper when she wants to be a Beyblade. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Another video of mine should pop up now if you're interested. I'm off now to continue the never-ending quest for better drive discs. That sounds like I don't enjoy that. I actually really like getting those discs and then upgrading them and then watching them all roll into defense for what feels like the 50th time. I joke. Anyway, remember to like and subscribe for better than average luck on your pulls. Join the Discord, stay weird, pull responsibly. Bye.